Welcome. 2013 is a year of many birthdays. The Rockefeller Foundation has been celebrating our centennial, and of course we're here to celebrate Next City's 10th anniversary. We at Rockefeller have been doing plenty of celebrating this year, but of course we've had 100 years of practice. This evening is Next City's chance to catch up. I wasn't there, but I hear that the Rockefeller 10th anniversary party in 1923 was pretty wild and crazy. But of course, they don't refer to that decade as the boring 20s. So for us at Rockefeller, it's always a great pleasure to work with Next City. They have a tremendous team of writers and editors with a real commitment to the people who live in cities and those issues. And I just wanted to quickly mention two examples of that type of work where we at Rockefeller have been collaborating with them. The first is the Informal City Dialogues, which was pioneered by our former colleague, Benji de la Pena, who's now at the Knight Foundation. Not sure if he's here this evening. I think he was going to try and make it. But that effort has really been about a conversation around the strengths and the challenges of the informal sector in cities. And Next City took what was a really misunderstood topic and made it human and accessible. A compelling story of private bus drivers in Lima competing for fares, an engaging video about a market seller in Bangkok who had formerly been working for a private company with his business degree, now selling earrings on the streets of Bangkok and making almost as much money as he was in the corporate sector. And then the second example is the recently launched work on resilient cities, where Next City has been providing on-the-ground perspectives that really show the policy choices and priorities that cities are facing in a world of growing shocks and stresses, from New York's wastewater system to Guangzhou's plan to prevent Carmageddon. And I use these two examples because I think they show the combination of compelling human stories, but also enlightening urban policy debates that Next City combines so well. I would also note that throughout the last 10 years, Next City has really been one step ahead. They moved from print to online before many publications realized that that was the future, and they evolved from Next American City to Next City, recognizing the shared global challenges that we all face. They're also often ahead of the biggest news organizations. Just this week, on Monday, Next City ran a story with the headline, "The Black Car Company That People Love to Hate." And on Tuesday, Frank Bruni in the New York Times was complaining about Uber and how they require people to specify how roomy and regal their rides should be. I was an avid reader of Next City in my previous work at HUD and at the city's housing department, but I have to confess I was not reading Next City in 2003, but I am proud to say that Rockefeller's collaboration with Next City was from the beginning. We were Next City's first major funder when a Rockefeller Foundation program officer saw the potential of this burgeoning publication and was one of the first to step up. And as Next City has gone from strength to strength, so has that program officer, who is now the president of the Ford Foundation. And so I'm proud this evening to introduce Darren Walker, who from his work on community development in Harlem, through championing post-Katrina recovery in New Orleans when he was at Rockefeller, and now to his leadership at Ford, has made life better for so many residents in so many cities. And in the same way that Next City gives voice to both the policy wonk and the slum dweller, so Darren is both a thinker, leader, and innovator on urban development, as well as an ally and advocate for the poor and marginalized in cities around the world. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Darren Walker, the president of the Ford Foundation.
Good evening. let's give it up for the next city. So I was teaching a law school class at the NYU Law School, and there were these brilliant young law students, these remarkable people, and among them was this very nice, quiet, shy, but brilliant guy. Adam Gordon was someone who I would call on in class, and he would always have an insightful observation about the fact pattern I had laid out. And on one occasion, he came up after class and said, some friends and I are working on this thing, this idea, and it's a magazine, and because you care about cities and you talk about cities a lot, I want to tell you about it. And he started to lay out the vision, and he then brought in Seth Brown, and they came to see me in my office and delivered this brilliant, well thought out, provocative, disruptive idea for this magazine. And before I knew it, which is what you should never do when you work at a foundation, I said, how much money do you need? And they, being like really smart young people, didn't ask for enough. And I said, oh, you need more money than that for this idea. This idea is bigger than $100,000. It's several $100,000, don't you think? And I actually then convinced them that they should take more money, which never happens when you meet with anyone at a foundation, as most of you probably know who've ever met with anyone at a foundation. And from there began this remarkable odyssey, and bringing in Anika Singh, and the vision that unfolded, edition after edition, issue after issue, idea after idea. It unfolded before our eyes. And when I think back on that, I wonder what captured everyone's imagination, because immediately they burst on the scene. And the urban scene at that time was still rather early. Not everyone had gotten on the urban bandwagon. This was over 10 years ago. And there were still people who were questioning this idea of whether the urban was really the future. And so it was so exciting to see that the idea that germinated with these young people who went outside of the normative boundaries of journalism and of urban development, the paradigm that we were all stuck in, and they completely blew it up. And it was transformative, and it has been transformative. And when you think about the influence of the journalism, the ideas, the ingenuity that has emerged from this magazine and now this online journal, it is truly remarkable. This is the future. They are the future. And I would only say that for all of us, many of my colleagues from the Ford Foundation are here tonight. We look to you for ideas. We look to you for guidance as we think about how we can invest smartly and strategically to help solve urban problems. So I just want to offer a big congratulations to Next City. You deserve it, you have earned it, and we are enormously proud of you. So the last part of my performance is to introduce one of my sheroes. Diana Lynn is a fierce, determined, bold, imaginative, inimitable, indefatigable, woman who refuses to take no for an answer. And this is why she is so successful. This is why she is so remarkable. This is why she is so admired. Please welcome Diana Lind.
Okay, well, that was the best intro ever. I will never get an intro like that ever again. So thank you, Darren. I really appreciate that. And it's very exciting to have you at the top of the Ford Foundation. Some very exciting things are afoot there, and I can't wait to see the impact. So in addition to Darren, I would also like to thank Don Tsien at the Ford Foundation, whose belief in Next City about 2 years ago really enabled this huge transformation from a print magazine to digital publication. And it was really integral in the success of the organization over the past 2 years. Neill Coleman and everyone at Rockefeller, I really want to thank you as well. As Darren mentioned, or I think as Neill mentioned, getting that first major grant was incredibly important, but also Rockefeller has really pushed us along the way in terms of, getting us to drop the American as our middle name and reaching out abroad, which has been hugely important in expanding our horizons and thinking really about the massive changes underway in urbanization and other cities abroad. And I'd like to thank Benji de la Pena, who indeed brainstormed with me the format of tonight's event. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. Thank you to Bank of America, Open Society Foundation, and Robert and Eugenie Birch, who sponsored tonight's event. And then I'd also like to thank Next City's staff, who without this, Next City obviously would not exist and be this amazing organization. So I think everyone at Next City deserves a round of applause. And we do have all of the co-founders here tonight, which is especially exciting. So I'd like to thank Seth Brown, Anika Singh, and Adam Gordon, who you'll hear from a little bit later on. So yeah, they deserve a round of applause too. And actually, I forgot to also thank the Surdna Foundation, who kept us focused on American cities, even though we took the American out of our name. And that has been very important to us as well. So we're celebrating our first decade, which is an incredibly exciting moment for us. And it's great to hear Darren thinking back to 2003, when people weren't thinking about cities the same way that they are today. And in fact, you think back to 2003, Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Sandy hadn't happened. Gas cost about $1.72 a gallon. Sprawl was continuing apace. People were really fretting that cities wouldn't revitalize and that the inner cores of our cities would be decimated. And at the same time, there were no iPhones, and few people actually knew what a blog was. So this past decade has witnessed this huge transformation in terms of the way that people get information and the ways that cities are built. And I can't think of an organization that has been at the center of these two trends more than Next City. We've really been focused on how cities are urbanizing and also how people are getting information about them. We're continuing to evolve as an organization, and so in the coming months, we have a number of exciting announcements to make. We'll be launching a new app for Forefront subscribers. We'll also be soon announcing our 5th annual Vanguard Conference, which is our annual Young Leaders Conference, and very excitingly, we have some Vanguard members in the crowd tonight, and that will be held in Chattanooga. And we're also excited to be partnering with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development on the 7th World Urban Forum in Medellin, Colombia, next April. So that's just a tiny glimpse of some of the exciting things that we're focusing on in the coming months and sort of building off of this momentum and this awesome period over the past 2 years. So we feel like we are graduating a bit from these sort of humble startup roots into being a more robust and influential organization. And when you graduate from college, you don't listen to panel discussions or PowerPoints. You end up listening to commencement speakers, and valedictorians, people who are sharing with you their personal struggles, their fears, their ultimate resilience, and their triumphs. And so we want to take a moment here before we take this big leap into the next decade to reflect with you, our closest supporters and friends, and think for a moment. Because what those speeches, those commencement speeches are really about is the search for knowledge. And this thing that sort of ties all the stories tonight together is the way that people imbue places with significance and meaning and personal relationships, how we are continuing to figure out and search for the true meaning of ourselves and the cities that we live in. So before I give away the topics for this evening at hand, I'd like to stop and say thank you once again to all of you who have come out tonight, and in particular, thank you to our event host committee, who has not only come out in force, but also brought in a new audience to Next City. And thank you for being a part of this awesome anniversary.